What happens when the divine breaks into human reality through the most intimate part of ourselves, our own flesh? In Exodus 4, we witness one of Scripture's most visceral signs. Moses' hand, healthy one moment, leprous the next, then miraculously restored. This isn't just ancient history. It's a window into how God communicates through transformation, vulnerability, and the very essence of what makes us human. When God chose to speak through Moses' flesh, he established a profound truth. Divine communication transcends words. The leprous hand represents God's ability to use physical reality as his vocabulary, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. This miraculous sign emerged at a pivotal moment. Moses stood before the burning bush, overwhelmed by his calling to lead Israel out of Egypt. His protests about inadequacy were met not with reassurance alone, but with tangible proof of divine power working through human frailty. The transformation of Moses' hand from healthy to diseased to restored again reveals the foundational principle of how God operates. He takes what is whole, allows it to experience brokenness, then demonstrates his power through restoration. This pattern becomes the blueprint for understanding divine intervention throughout Scripture. The leper's hand wasn't just a magic trick. It was a theological statement about God's sovereignty over health and disease, life and death, despair and hope. This sign also established Moses' authority not through his eloquence or strength, but through his willingness to be vulnerable before God and others. The very hand that would later lift the staff to part the Red Sea first had to experience the humiliation and isolation that leprosy brought. In ancient cultures, leprosy represented the ultimate separation from community, the living death that marked individuals as untouchable. By allowing his hand to experience this condition, Moses embodied the exile and restoration that would define Israel's entire journey. The immediate context reveals God's pedagogical method. He doesn't simply command belief. He provides experiential proof. The leper's hand served as Moses' first lesson in trusting God's power over seemingly impossible circumstances. This wasn't merely about convincing Pharaoh or the Israelites. It was about convincing Moses himself that God who could transform flesh in an instant, could certainly transform a nation's destiny. The specific mechanics of Moses' hand transformation reveal profound theological truths about the nature of divine signs. When God instructed Moses to put his hand inside his cloak and withdraw it, the change was immediate and complete. Not a gradual deterioration, but an instantaneous shift from health to advanced leprosy. This sudden transformation demonstrates God's absolute authority over natural processes and biological laws. The visual impact cannot be understated. Leprosy in Moses' time presented as white, scaly skin that immediately identified the sufferer as ceremonially unclean and socially isolated. The hand that Moses would use to gesture, to write, to lead, and to bless became in that moment a symbol of humanity's fundamental brokenness. Yet this wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The shocking nature of the transformation served multiple purposes. It grabbed attention, demonstrated divine power, and created an unforgettable teaching moment. The reversal proved equally dramatic. When Moses placed his leprous hand back inside his cloak and withdrew it again, the restoration was complete and perfect. Ancient medical knowledge couldn't explain such healing. Leprosy was considered incurable, progressive, and terminal. The restored hand bore no scars, showed no residual effects, and functioned perfectly. This complete healing foreshadowed the ultimate restoration God planned for his people, demonstrating that no condition is beyond divine intervention. The tactile nature of this sign created a deeply personal experience for Moses. He felt the change in his flesh, experienced the horror of disease and the joy of restoration. This wasn't merely visual. It was visceral, embedding the reality of God's power into Moses' very being. The memory of that transformation would sustain him through future doubts and challenges, providing a physical reference point for God's faithfulness. The sign also established a pattern for understanding divine validation. Throughout Scripture, authentic divine signs share certain characteristics. They're immediate, complete, undeniable, and serve God's broader purposes. The leprous hand met all these criteria, becoming the prototype for recognizing genuine divine intervention versus human manipulation or natural phenomena. The choice of Moses' hand as the vehicle for this sign carries profound symbolic weight that resonates throughout biblical theology. Hands represent human agency, capability, and action. They're how we interact with the world, create, build, bless, and accomplish our purposes. By transforming Moses' hand, God demonstrated his authority over human capability itself, showing that our most fundamental abilities remain subject to his sovereign will. Leprosy, in ancient understanding, represented more than physical disease. It symbolized spiritual corruption, social death, and divine judgment. The immediate onset of leprosy on Moses' hand created a powerful metaphor for the human condition. We are all, in our natural state, separated from God's holiness and in desperate need of divine intervention. The hand's condition mirrored humanity's spiritual state without God's grace. The restoration of the hand becomes equally symbolic, representing the complete redemption God offers. Just as the leprous hand was made perfectly whole without any trace of disease, God's redemptive work in human lives creates complete restoration. The healed hand symbolizes the new creation that God makes possible, not merely improvement of our existing condition, but total transformation into something that bears no marks of former brokenness. The hand's transformation also foreshadows the incarnation itself, God taking on human flesh to demonstrate his power and accomplish redemption. Just as Moses' hand experienced disease and restoration, Christ would take on human nature, experience the curse of sin, and emerge victorious through resurrection. The leper's hand becomes a prophetic sign pointing toward the ultimate revelation of God in human flesh. The tactile nature of this sign emphasizes the physical reality of faith. Moses didn't just see or imagine the transformation, he felt it in his own body. This sensory experience created an unshakable foundation for his faith, demonstrating that genuine encounters with God engage our whole being, mind, spirit, and body. The leper's hand reminds us that faith isn't merely intellectual assent, but involves our entire human experience. The principle demonstrated through Moses' leprous hand continues to operate in contemporary spiritual life, though its manifestations may look different. Modern believers still experience the divine pattern of allowing weakness to reveal strength, using brokenness as a platform for restoration, and demonstrating God's power through transformed lives. The same God who could instantly transform diseased flesh continues to work miraculous transformations in human hearts and circumstances. In our current context, the leprous hand speaks to issues of identity and self-worth. Just as Moses' hand was transformed without his effort or merit, modern spiritual transformation occurs through divine grace rather than human achievement. People struggling with addiction, depression, broken relationships, or spiritual emptiness can find hope in this ancient sign. The same power that restored Moses' hand remains available to restore any area of human brokenness. The sign's emphasis on immediate, complete transformation challenges contemporary gradual approaches to change. While personal growth often occurs incrementally, the leprous hand reminds us that God can accomplish in a moment what years of human effort cannot achieve. This doesn't diminish the value of process and persistence, but it maintains hope for breakthrough moments when divine intervention accelerates transformation beyond natural possibilities. Medical advances have conquered many diseases that were incurable in Moses' time, yet we still face conditions, both physical and spiritual, that exceed human solutions. The leper's hand serves as a reminder that no situation is beyond God's intervention. Terminal diagnoses, incurable addictions, irreconcilable relationships, and impossible circumstances all remain subject to the same divine power that transformed Moses' diseased hand. The sign also speaks to leadership preparation in contemporary contexts. Like Moses, modern leaders often receive divine validation before they fully understand their calling. The leprous hand reminds us that effective spiritual leadership emerges from personal encounters with God's transforming power, not merely from training, talent, or ambition. Those called to lead others must first experience God's intervention in their own lives. Despite our analysis and understanding, the leprous hand ultimately points toward mysteries that transcend human comprehension. The instantaneous transformation of living tissue defies medical explanation even today. The precise mechanism by which divine will translates into physical reality remains beyond scientific investigation or theological explanation. This sign reminds us that God's ways genuinely surpass human understanding. The arbitrary nature of the miracle, why Moses' hand specifically, why leprosy particularly, why at this precise moment, highlights the sovereign freedom of divine action. God operates according to his own purposes and methods, which don't always align with human logic or expectation. The leprous hand teaches us to embrace the mystery inherent in divine communication rather than demanding complete comprehension. The sign also reveals the limits of human categories for understanding divine action. We classify events as natural or supernatural, possible or impossible, based on our limited experience and knowledge. The leprous hand suggests that these categories may be artificial constructs that don't reflect the true nature of reality as God experiences and governs it. What appears miraculous to us may be simply the normal exercise of divine authority over creation. The enduring power of this ancient sign to speak to contemporary hearts points toward truths that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. The leprous hand communicates across millennia because it addresses fundamental human needs and divine realities that remain constant. Our need for transformation, God's power to accomplish it, and the mystery of how divine love expresses itself through miraculous intervention. Perhaps most mysteriously, the leprous hand suggests that God's primary concern isn't our comfort, but our faith. Moses could have received reassurance without experiencing the trauma of seeing his hand diseased. Yet God chose the more dramatic path, creating an experience that would permanently mark Moses' understanding of divine power. This reminds us that God's methods often prioritize eternal transformation over temporary comfort.